I committed to raising $1 million for a deal after 289 calls, 4+ calls per day, and I was only able to raise. My first goal as a warrior was to close on over 100+ units by December 15th. Guess when Gainesville closed? December 12th. I think it's important to really record what each investor is looking for. I concentrate on that.
A setback on a first deal to closing on a 312 unit, and now you're working on 2,000 more units. Project us out. How do you see yourself getting there?
Welcome to the new version of Multifamily Rockstars. And you guys know we're always trying to make things better. If you didn't know that, we are, trust me. That's why, we've got probably a dozen books that we've written to add value to you guys. They're over at Rod's links, by the way. But we've decided to make these Rockstar episodes more deep dives into guest deals, where we give you really more practical and actionable items for you to get started and actually do your first deal, especially if you're new to multifamily. And of course, I've got my co-host Mark Nagy here with me.
Good to be here, Rod, as we're, I think, approaching episode 100 of the Rockstars pretty soon here.
Are we really? Wow.
That's so.
Awesome. That's awesome. Fantastic. Well, today we've got a real dynamic guest that I'm excited. We had a little pre-framing and some of the questions we might ask and some of his answers, and I was really impressed with what he had. And so his name is Brian Fay, and he's in 312 units so far as a warrior, and he's got a lot of construction background, plumbing background. And he's just a great communicator. So very excited to get into this. Welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Rod. Thank you, Mark. You bet. It's good to be here.
Good. So why don't you give us some background on you, buddy? Tell us, where you came from, what you're up to, and just give us a little high-level overview of who you are and why you're here.
Yes. I'm here. I'm grateful. It's good to be alive. And, I've been through a lot in my life. 13 years ago, I was actually just going through a tough time dealing with drugs and alcohol. And, I came down to Florida for treatment at that point. And, that's kind of where my journey began in Florida. And, I lived in a halfway house and came from the bottom. I had absolutely nothing and worked extremely hard, just doing everything I could to serve and, bring others value throughout my life. And, today I have just a beautiful family, an amazing wife, 2 children. My son actually turned 8 yesterday. My daughter is 9 years old. They're, just great kids. We do a ton of sports. And, I also own a construction company and a plumbing company down here in South Florida now. I've been doing that with my wife for the last 10 years. And, I've made the transition over the last 6 months into real estate full time. And my wife actually runs the construction and plumbing company. And I just focus on real estate investment full time now.
That's fantastic. You've got a great story, coming, you start at rock bottom. There's only one way to go when you're at rock bottom. And so, I love that and love what you've accomplished in really a short amount of time. So what do you think, at my warrior events, as you know, and at my boot camps, I always ask people to get up and network and tell others what their superpower is. What do you think has been the superpower that has helped you with your? I mean, you've got 2 companies you own. You're in real estate now. You're in hundreds of doors already. Things are happening. What do you think that superpower is that has helped you effectuate that?
I thought about this question for a while because it's something we always discuss as warriors, and I really think my superpower is I'm a great connector. I'm always, setting up calls. I'm always getting on calls with people, and, I'm working to, figure out where I can bring value in any way possible. If someone, needs something, I may have talked to someone else that I can connect them with, and, they'll be able to bring value to one another. I also focus on capital raising, and I've spent a lot of time on that and building my investor list. And I think it's important to really record what each investor is looking for. And, I concentrate on that.
One thing you said about hearing what people need and connecting them with people that serve that need, I call that super networking, honestly. And I've only met a handful of people that do that incredibly effectively. I mean, and they are incredibly connected, because when you add value, when you unilaterally look at somebody's needs and add value like that, you're truly becoming a super networker, and you build an incredible database when you do that. So if you perfect that process, and you're going to have a Rolodex. We call them Rolodexes. That ages me, but you're going to have a client list and a roster that'll supersede anybody I know, frankly. So love it.
So walk us through how you do that, Brian, because I know you have a very regimented daily activity that you do, and I think you can bring some major value to the listeners right here at the beginning of this podcast. What are the daily activities? List out everything that you do every single day to build that network.
Yes. Yeah. So what I focus on is my KPIs. And every single day, what I do is I record how many LinkedIn messages I send out. I do 100 LinkedIn messages. Let me bring up my KPIs so I can read them to you. 5 LinkedIn posts per day, 10 LinkedIn comments per day. And from those LinkedIn messages and comments and posts, it almost always leads to 5 video calls per day. And from those 5 video calls, I'm able to record in my CRM and my spreadsheet what the other person was looking for. For instance, there's a land deal I'm working on north of Orlando, and a warrior came to me and they asked, can you find, or like, we need to close on this land deal, but in order to do it, we need to find a developer. Can you find a developer for this land? And I spent a lot of time on it, and I was able to come through and find a developer for the land. And that's just one example of many, but I'm always focusing on that. And then every single morning when I wake up, I'll email the group that I spoke to the previous day. And it helps me, keep it in thought, like, okay, this person was looking for whatever it was, preferred equity, or this person was looking for debt, or this person needed help raising capital, or this person needed help with underwriting. And I do my best to link up people together to make sure, they're bringing value to one another. And another huge thing that has been very helpful is anytime I hear a straight rock star on your podcast, Rod, I chase them down on social media. I find them on LinkedIn. I find them on Facebook. I send them a message and I get on the phone with them. And I've done really well with that and met amazing people through that process.
In this business, it's who you know. It's not what you know. I tell new warriors, one of the conversations I have with them is, don't focus. What I'm going to tell you is more important than learning the business, and that is connecting with other warriors, because our most successful warriors by far are the most connected. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's the truth. Focus on that. It's more important than learning the business, is the networking. So you're mastering the most important piece. So let me ask you this. We've got listeners that haven't taken action yet. What's one action item you might be able to go deep on that can benefit one of my listeners they can actually start doing right now? What's an action item that comes to mind when I say that?
I mean, I can think of a ton of different action items, but most importantly, like I when I'm speaking with other people, I'm always focusing on the other person I'm talking to. I'm trying to dig into their issues. I'm working on figuring out resolutions, and and just take action now. If you think of something that you need to do in this business, don't write it down and think, oh, I'll get to it this afternoon. Use that energy and just go now. Pick up the phone, go to that meeting, get on that Zoom, whatever it takes, just do it now. And,
love it.
Yeah, man. And write out your goals. That's huge. I have my goals. If you can see my office around me in the screen, I have Post-it notes and sticky notes everywhere with my goals on them. And I look at them, I read them every day, I stick to them. And my first goal as a warrior was to close on over 100+ units by December 15th. I still have it up here, and with a spirit of absolute faith. And guess when Gainesville closed?
When?
December 12th.
I love it.
312 units. Yeah. So,
I
I
love
mean,
it.
that's huge. I have my goals in my truck. I have them up on my screen. I have them in my bedroom, just constant reminder. And a huge thing is, your subconscious mind, like we hear from Napoleon Hill all the time. I know you're a huge Napoleon Hill fan,
Mm-hmm.
as am I. And, to have a spirit of absolute faith, just really knowing and believing you can do it. And that goes so far in this business because, it can be scary, it can be hard, but if you just stay focused on whatever KPIs, metrics you create, stay focused on your goals, and you will reach them.
I will tell you this, a couple things you said. You talked about focusing on the other person. That is what Dale Carnegie talks about in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. When you have a sincere, and that's the operative word, sincere interest in the other person, they feel it. You're asking them questions. They're doing most of the talking. They think it's the greatest conversation they've ever had because they're doing most of the talking. And then you also said action. It's massive freaking action. You just do it. And I love that you brought up Napoleon Hill. I've given away, I mentioned this in a podcast where I got interviewed recently. I believe it's somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 copies of Think and Grow Rich. And there you've got it in your hand right there, Think and Grow Rich. See, that's a book you read several times a year. So I totally am on board with everything you just said.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian. Gainesville, I believe that was only 3 months after Rod's Bootcamp and coming on board. But before we get into that one, I know you did have another deal that you worked on that was a little bit of a setback. Tell us about that deal and what did you learn and what did you change from having that setback from that deal?
So yeah, this was my first deal as a warrior. And, as you always say, Rod, it was a seminar, a wonderful learning experience. I committed to raising $1 million for a deal. And, after 289 calls, 4+ calls per day, I fell short and I was only able to raise $50,000.
All right, I have to ask you a question about that. Okay.
Yes.
Why? Because so you were doing something wrong. There's no question. You had that many calls. Either the deal sucked, your presentation, I don't want to say it sucked, but your presentation may have sucked. What was it that caused that? Did you look back on it and figure that out is my question.
Yes.
Because there's one of those two things. One of those two things, the deal or you, okay? And I'm sorry to put your foot to the fire here, but, I think it'll be valuable to explore why that happened because that doesn't happen.
Yes. So I would chalk it up to, a little bit of both. It was definitely a learning experience. I've had, a decent amount of sales experience with my construction and plumbing company.
Okay. Sure.
And and this, it was a overall learning experience. And, for my investors that I had built into my list, they had very specific criteria they were looking for. They wanted certain returns in a certain period of time and, and certain exit plans. And none of those really penciled out for
on that deal.
Investor list, on that deal for my investor list. But the great thing was during that journey, that capital raising journey, I was able to meet even more people. I was able to record what their specific buy box was. And that helped substantially with moving forward. And, just kept in touch with them, because capital raising, it's kind of like, farming. You always want to be, in contact, letting your investor base know what's going on. You are serving your investors and they're a huge part of this business and they are very important to getting deals done.
Yeah, I mean, no question. And I love the farming analogy. You know, you're watering, you're cultivating, you're seeding, all of those things. It's the same thing in sales. You know, when you're selling like a realtor, they call it a farm area where you're farming a neighborhood or something. And it's the same thing with investors. You know, 289 calls is a lot. I'm guessing you learned how to sell investors on those calls. You learned what to say, what not to say, how to really step into their shoes and so on and so forth. And yeah, if the deal wasn't a home run, it's all about the deal right now. And so, you know, I don't know the particulars of that deal, but 224 units in Pennsylvania. What was not great about that? What was not great about that particular deal?
Overall, the deal had a solid team with a lot of
Okay.
experience. And what turned my investors off was the timeline, the exit
Okay.
plan. We were looking at a 5 to most likely a 7-year exit. And my investors are more looking for that 3 to 5 year exit plan.
Mm.
And that was very difficult. And then it was in an area that had declining population growth. It was
Hmm.
very slightly declining, but it was declining, and that was a huge turnoff for my
This an
investors.
older asset?
Yes, older asset. Yep.
Yeah, I assume that. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you, by the way, guys, those of you listening, if you're going to do this business, and I'm going to say this to you as well, brother, is, you need to tell them it's a 5-year horizon. Okay. And it could even be longer. And because that really is this business to turn, like, especially in the economic environment we're in right now, to think you're going to turn a deal in 3 years is probably unrealistic right now. So we'll talk about the second deal, the Gainesville deal now.
Yes, yes. So the second deal went much better. It was 312 units in Gainesville, Florida. You know, I was able to help organize JV partners together for the purchase, and it was or is a very underperforming student housing, and we're converting it to a much needed multifamily market rate.
Now, did you do anything to convert it, or was it just tenant turnover where you had to get students out and put new tenants in, or was there anything specific you guys did to the actual units?
Yeah, so it was a lot of tenant turnover, rebranding of the asset, and we're also doing some CapEx, where the CapEx budget is around $5 million,
That's a
and we're
huge capex. That's a huge capex budget. We're doing that right now
yes,
on a 200 unit. It's huge. So I have a question on that. You said you did it as a JV.
yes,
So you had some big money partners come in.
yes, big money
How
partners.
much was the raise? I mean, it
It
wasn't
was
even a raise.
around
How much did you actually put in equity?
yeah, so the total equity needed was right around 11 million. And
Okay.
we did the capital stack. We did 2 million in pref equity,
Okay.
and then it was 3 joint venture partners altogether.
Wow.
Are these
Wow.
partners you
That's it.
brought? Did other Warriors bring the partners?
I brought 2 of the partners.
Wow.
That's fantastic, buddy. That is really
Now that's a big cap from being able to raise 50K to yeah.
very unusual to do a JV at that price range. So that's why I had to stop you. Very impressive.
Yes.
So how'd you find this thing?
Yeah. So it was right around September, and I had just gotten out of the Orlando boot camp, just joined as a Warrior. I am fired up from that weekend, and I go right into a networking event at the University of Miami School of Architecture. And it just so happened me and this group I'm working with showed up an hour early for the event. And I'm fired up from the boot camp, and we just hit it off and just started talking multifamily. And then we started talking about this deal that he had been working on for over a year in negotiation. And then they invited me into their office, and we just really hit it off. And yeah, that's how it all came together.
So really a lot of networking. I keep hearing networking over and over and over again, right? It seems to be the main key of what you were able to do. And I know you have a lot of other deals in the pipeline as well. Tell us about some of those other deals that you're working on and and what you're doing moving forward in terms of networking and how you got into these. Because I see a massive list of deals that you're currently working on. I think you mentioned 2,000 units almost that I see on here.
We have some pretty decent sized development projects coming up, and that's with the same group from Gainesville. So they saw the value that I was able to bring to that deal, and they decided to bring me on to help with these other deals. And so we have, and then we have different senior living facilities.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge proponent for senior living right now. There's 80 million baby boomers, that are getting old, and so no, it's called the silver tsunami. It's coming. So I love senior housing. So I love the fact that it looks like you've got quite a few coming up here in Wisconsin, Georgia. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So I teamed up with some warriors, and we have 2 senior living facilities in Georgia that were in final negotiations on the PSA. We should finally go under contract or officially go under contract, I'd say midweek next week. And then I have 2 senior living facilities in Wisconsin with other warriors that we have an exclusive LOI signed right now.
That's fantastic. By the way, guys, if you're interested in applying to our Warrior program, that's all we interview on these Rockstar episodes is warriors, successful warriors. If you're interested, text the word CRUSH to 72345. And if you do that, you check us out, we check you out, and I can tell you, and then we will be speaking for sure. But yeah, definitely text the word CRUSH to 72345 if you want to chat with us about that. So senior living, you're doing a hotel. And you're raising money for assets in Houston and in Atlanta. You got a lot going on. You got a lot going on, brother. Wow. Okay.
I'm just connecting the dots in my head from everything you're telling us, Brian. I don't want to say fail, a setback on a first deal to closing on a 312 unit. And because you closed on that deal, you now built credibility, and now you're working on 2,000 more units of new construction, senior facilities, all these other things. Project us out to the future. I mean, you're only 5 months in the program. Project us out. What do you think it's going to take at this pace to get you to, your version of financial freedom? And how do you see yourself getting there?
How long?
I think at this pace, I'll be set up for financial freedom, financial independence in 2 years, and it'll be 3,000 units under contract, or 3,000 assets. 3,000 units under management.
Yeah, love it. One of the questions we like to ask on these now is a hot topic question. So what is the hot topic in multifamily that you feel everybody's talking about right now? What do you think about the topic? And, so give me an idea of, what you think about what I just said. What are your thoughts?
There's so much going on in multifamily right now. And the topic I'm watching closely is the $436 billion in multifamily debt that is potentially troubled. And, with the rising multifamily financing costs and the huge amount of loans maturing, we're looking at approximately $96 billion in 2024. This is going to cause significant distress. And I'm already seeing deals across my desk right now where operators, they're starting to see where they need to do cash in refinances instead of cash out refinances. And that's causing a lot of distress. And, we're going to see that this year.
So Brian, just for the listeners, you mentioned deals coming across your desk. For some practical knowledge on the listeners, how are you getting those deals? Are those brokers that are bringing them? Are they other warriors? Are they direct to seller? What are you doing to get these distressed deals in front of your eyes?
I get deals from other warriors through networking, getting on the phone with them, and through brokers, building relationship with brokers, building relationships with other operators. And that's how I find my deals.
All the above. Okay. So I know you've got an interesting story about becoming a warrior. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So before the boot camp last last year in Orlando, we actually we got together with our construction group, and our staff accountant, she actually used to work for Grant Cardone. And we're
Oh,
always talking, yes, we're actually always talking about your podcast and multifamily syndication. And we had been talking about your boot camp for a few months. And our accountant, she actually kind of went behind our back and bought tickets to your boot camp for our entire leadership team. So, and
wow.
she booked the hotels and all of that. So I kind of owe her a
Wow.
lot at this point.
Wow.
And
Wow. Well, give her a thank you for me as well. I love that. That's
yes,
beautiful.
yes,
So,
yeah.
so
So we had it.
she worked for Grant and she set this up for my event.
Yes,
Okay. Well, I like
Interesting.
hearing that. So let me ask you this. Are you okay with listeners reaching out to you?
yes, yes. I'm okay with listeners reaching out.
So how do they do that?
The easiest way is to reach out to me through LinkedIn. You can search Brian Fay. You can look for Vice President of Florida Palm Construction. That's my construction company, and that'll come up. And I highly suggest checking out the Warrior program as well. That's a great way to get in touch with me.
And there's a clue, by the way. Brian mentioned earlier in this podcast, one thing that you did is you just started reaching out to people that you listen to this podcast. And so for people listening that like that idea, start with that. Reach out to Brian, set up a call, start building relationships, start taking action. And that could be your first step to do that.
No question. Just a quick aside, Brian. I saw you're the
Yeah.
VP of the construction company. Is the boss the wife that's running the construction company right now, or who is it?
Yes. My wife Ileana, yes, she's
Yeah,
running the
I love it.
construction and plumbing company.
So let me ask you this, man. I mean, you have come from low as the bottom low to extraordinary success, and I'm definitely going to see you again in a year on this podcast, and it's going to be extraordinary to see where you're at. I can see that happening. What's the driver for you, brother? What's the why? You know all about goal setting and establishing your why. We do that at my boot camps. And by the way, if you're not signed up for my virtual boot camp in April, what are you thinking? Okay, DM me on any social channel. You can come for $97, and I don't sell anything there. So just get your butt there. You'll be glad you did. But let me ask you this: what's your why, brother? What's driving all this for you?
That's a question that gets me emotional, Rod. I with being through so much, and when you're getting clean and sober, you literally have to change everything. For me, it was moving to a new state, moving from Pennsylvania to Florida, literally changing everything. And it takes everything to get that. And, I'm just like, it's an extreme amount of gratitude. I want to provide for my family, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely my family and my kids and giving them the life that they deserve. I have an amazing family, and going through all that toughness, like those
Yeah.
tough times gave me the strength to really just like push through and do whatever it takes to get it done in this business.
Love it. Love it. Well, thanks for coming on, brother. Very impressive. Loved your answers. Loved the value you added. And it's great to see you again, buddy.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Yes. Yes. Thank you guys.